Radio.
Paranormal Review Radio.
Hello, everyone. It is welcome to Paranormal Review Radio, the only radio show without commercials and with more great paranormal talk. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Anthony Agati in New York.
And I'm Lucy Liebfried in Chicago. You are listening to one of the highest rated paranormal radio shows on Blog Talk. No bull, no lies, just a true platform for everyone to share their knowledge and experiences. When searching for the truth, good communication is key. Now, our phone lines are open for questions or stories. The number to call is 661-244-9831. Make sure you press the number 1 to get into the queue. We'll try to get to you as soon as we can. Otherwise, our chat room is open, so you can post any comments or questions there as well. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Paranormal Review Radio. You'll find more articles, blogs, and full show uploads. And if you have specific questions, comments, or would like to be a guest on the show, email us at paranormal.review@aol.com. Now, sit back, get comfy, and prepare to open your mind. It's time for Paranormal Review Radio.
Well, before Ghost Adventures or Ghost Hunters, before Paranormal State or Most Haunted, before Unsolved Mysteries or In Search Of, there was a time when the paranormal was not a household name or a hobby that some people picked up for a long birthday weekend. It was real, it was frightening, and it was never talked about. Imagine living during this time with the spirit activity in your home, night after night and day after day. Disruptions, bangs, the phone constantly being taken off the receiver, doors opening and closing. Imagine living with that constant nuisance and anger. It would drive you mad, right? Now, add the fact that you can't just call or email a ghost hunter to stop by and deal with it. Why? Because those groups did not exist. What do? How do you stop the chaos and mental anguish? You certainly can't just up and move without any money, and you certainly don't receive the help from the church in a timely fashion. Do you give up? Well, our guest tonight experienced all of this and more, and to top it all off, the resolution for this madness was broadcasted on NBC television in 1971 for the world to see. It was the first ever live televised exorcism ever, but in this particular case, the exorcism didn't work. At the time, 24-year-old Ed Becker purchased a home for himself and his expecting wife, a 2-flat apartment building, which would allow them to live in one apartment and rent the other. What Ed didn't know was that there was already tenants residing in this building that he could not evict. Skeptical and street smart, Ed has the difficult time coming to the realization that this apartment is home to the paranormal. As tensions begin to build between his spouse and himself, he attributes the stress to the new lifestyle they had accumulated as both property owners and new parents. Coupled with the efforts of working long hours and restoring a dilapidated home, Ed ignores the unusual happenings that have no viable explanation. And what happens when something that wants to be noticed goes unacknowledged? Things escalate. Tonight we have the honor of speaking with Edwin Becker to discuss what was the birth of paranormal television and public attention to the field regarding his family's experiences, thoughts, troubles, and of course, his case of true hauntings. Please help me in welcoming to the show Mr. Edwin Becker. Hi, Ed. It's so great to have you on the show with us tonight.
Thank you, Anthony. It's a pleasure to be there. I want to excuse myself. During this program, here in Missouri, the vegetation is exploding. And we've got pollen, we've got mold, and I am allergy prone. So I could not take allergy medication today or I'd fall asleep on you. So if I mute myself for a second to either blow my nose or cough or something, I didn't hang up, okay?
Quite
yeah,
all right.
it's just awful. I mean, they actually cut my lawn 3 times in a week. That's how fast it's growing. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And then, if I could, just take a second, I want to thank Betsy Ann Morgan. She's a friend, and Betsy, you know what you did, so thank you. And a hello to Jimmy Clifton Faust Jr., just a fine person. And Brooke, thank you for the candle. She sent me a handmade, very fragrant candle, just a wonderful gift that was unnecessary, but I'll keep it anyway. So thank you, Brooke. Where do you want to go, Anthony? From the beginning?
Well, first off, Ed, I want to welcome you to the show.
Well, thank you.
You know what? I read both of your books, True Haunting and True Haunting 2, and, I was in awe of this experience. Now, what did you believe or not believe in regards to the paranormal before this time of your life?
It didn't exist then. I mean, I was brought up a very strict Catholic, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, only because of the exorcism. Because when Anthony mentioned the exorcism, ours failed, as would all exorcisms of a home. You can't exorcise an inanimate object if you think there's a demon there.
Yeah.
So I kind of knew that the guys who did the thing last year didn't read my book, or they would have learned something. And the one of them who I think he claims to be a bishop. I know the Catholic religion. I not only grew up in it, I worked for them because they have a computer bank on Ashland Avenue, Lucy, in Chicago, South Ashland.
Mm-hmm.
So I know them very well in their politics, and my aunt was in their accounting department in Continental Bank, and I've got a priest and 2 nuns in my family. And a bishop doesn't go in the field, okay? He lords over the other priests. And he does do ceremonies, communions and confirmations and things, but there is no bishop and there is no Catholic, bona fide Catholic, that would allow anything to be taped for public. So when they announced that, I knew immediately that this is bogus, okay? But I looked at the fellow's credentials, and he was actually an award-winning Elvis impersonator. I don't know if you know that.
Yes, we
no,
do.
that's honest to God truth. Yeah, so I felt sorry for the poor psychic because we'll talk about the exorcism, and psychics and exorcists don't get into the same room at the same time when there's some type of malevolent thing going on, because they're of exactly opposite philosophies. There's no way an exorcist would approve of a psychic trying to communicate with what he's about to confront. That would be absurd. That'd be absurd. And I found that out. And anybody who reads my book, it was the earliest time that it ever happened. But it was not. If you watch the YouTube video, you can see how successful they look. They look like they just got 40 lashes, And it lasted 3.5 hours. So it was a very long process. But, for your audience, if you could take yourself, those of you who weren't there in the 70s, you go back to the 70s, and it was relative to paranormal, it was a very innocent time. There was no such thing as haunted houses, okay? Phones, you couldn't own a phone. I get a lot of people who write me, and the younger people will say, "Why didn't you get some pictures on your iPhone, dude?" And it was like, no, we didn't have iPhones. You couldn't own a phone back then. And some women will write me and they get upset. You bought the house without your wife. Well, a woman's signature. That's why they had the women's lib movement in the mid '70s, because woman's signature was no good on a mortgage or for. they were just, they were wives, even if they brought in income. And all my relatives, my aunts and my grandmother and my mother all worked, but their income didn't count for squat in those years. The other thing is, fixing things up was awful because there were no Home Depots. And technology, the latest technology was a fax, actually, and then this new gizmo called a calculator, which was going to replace all the comptometers and the things with keys on it. So it was like being in the dark ages, even though it wasn't that long ago. And so that's the era that we lived in. And as a person who, when I bought the house, I looked at it. I mean, they had an open house, and I kind of should have known as a young man, because I was pretty savvy. But when I got to the open house and the salesman was sitting on the front stairs, sweating, and there's nobody there, it didn't attract too many people, okay? And I was very naive. And I don't know, for those of you who saw Paranormal Witness, they portrayed it correctly. We walked in, the real estate man said, "Would you like to tour the building?" I said, "Fine." I'd never done this in my life, and we walked into the first floor entrance, and the first floor apartment door opened, and this woman came flying out. I mean, filthy, matted gray hair, crystal blue eyes. She was holding a dirty poodle on her shoulder, cradled like a baby. The poodle was biting at her hair like he was nipping fleas or something. And she let out the curses. I mean, get out of this house. You don't belong here. We don't want you here. And she's screaming. And then the salesman, he starts screaming back in the same language, which, even though I was born and bred in the inner city, I didn't talk like that to my elders or to a woman, so I was kind of in shock. And after she went back in, Myra, he apologized, and he says the only way you can deal with her. And, of course, once I had a sample of that, it was like the only thing when we submitted the real estate contract, the only thing I asked for was that she be gone when we take possession. There's no way I want her there. And, of course, I worried about Marcia being exposed. Marcia was very, very timid. She came from Tulsa, very, very well-mannered, laid back. I knew this was going to scare the hell out of her. She ran into that. But we went through the building, and the person on the second floor had died. And that, Lucy, have you grown up in Chicago?
Yes, I did. Born and raised here.
Okay. Then you kind of know that in these old neighborhoods where buildings were built in the 1890s, they used to have funerals in the front rooms before, and I don't know of anybody. In my youth, I bounced around because of a dysfunctional childhood, but I don't know of anybody who didn't experience some of the phenomena that people consider, signs of paranormal. It was not unusual to feel chills or to feel, things like that in Chicago. And so my question would be, a lot of people think, well, our building was very, very active, of course. But I've gotten letters from people that one actually lives on the same street, and another woman actually lived on the same street, but she sold the building. She's now in Miami. But they wrote me that their buildings were active on the same street. And it's, you run into that in Chicago, but no one considered anything paranormal. And you didn't talk about it because, let me tell you, I'm not one that takes a lot of ridicule or skepticism. I don't enjoy that. And we got blasted. Okay, so I went through the building. I had an optimistic mind as a young man. It was, number one, I came from a very poverty-stricken family, so I was going to be a landowner. I mean, that's the optimism, and then I was going to fix this place up. Long before there were Home Depots and stuff, it was do it the hard way. You went to a tile store, you went to an electrical shop, you went to a flooring place, you went to a wallpaper place. But I figured, what I didn't know how to do, I could learn. And I saw it through rose-colored glasses. And none of the feelings I felt were frightening. In fact, I considered, considering we were thinking of living on the second floor, there was actually 2 rooms that were very cool, which was kind of unusual on a hot July day. And I thought that's an advantage. I figured, hey, I'm not going to need, they didn't have ceiling fans then, but I could have got a table fan. I thought this could, I won't need a window air conditioner. So, I saw everything the most positive way. Now, when my wife looked at it, about a week later, we were able to get the keys and tour the building. I tiptoed. She didn't understand. I was kind of a brash young man, and she didn't understand why all of a sudden I became quiet, and I sort of tiptoed past the first floor. She was looking at me kind of strange, like, why are you being so careful? I didn't want Myra to come popping out because it would scare the hell out of her. And for those of you who saw Paranormal Witness, when the producers called me and they gave me the screening, I saw that part of it, and they were so proud of themselves with the Myra that they cast, because it was actually the X-Files production team that shot the whole thing, our episode. And they said, what do you think of Myra? And I said, she's too soft and cuddly. And they said, what? And I said, the real Myra would have ate that woman alive. She was frightening. Just her eyes were frightening, But Marcia went through the building, and she was sensitive. And, it's kind of something that I've learned over the years now. Women are far more sensitive than men. There's no doubt about it, a majority of times. But yet, I always question why all the investigators, 90% of the investigators, are men.
Right.
Lucy, why?
I have no clue. I know I'm out there. But Ed, I want to ask you something, okay?
It's an ego thing, though, I think.
Go ahead.
Well, probably, and you guys look better in black T-shirts. But Ed, I want to ask you, you mentioned I grew up in Chicago. I, probably dating myself, but I grew up in Pilsen, okay? So I remember the old buildings, and I remember all of these things that happened.
You grew up where? Where?
In Pilsen on 18th Street.
Okay, yeah, I know, okay.
Okay, like 18th, Ashland, all around that area?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's near where the Catholics they have a computer bank there that it's still there. That's, as a young man, I got into computer technology after I quit being a professional musician, and I did some work for the Catholics there on South Ashland.
Well, talking about the atmosphere back in 1970, 1971, like you said, everybody knew that there was activity in buildings, but no one ever talked about it. When you bought this home, what was it that changed, that convinced you or made you start thinking along the lines that I really do have a ghost or something's going on here?
I'll be perfectly honest, and I've been called objectionable by people in the UK. As a young man, one woman told me I was a very objectionable young man. I was a denier, and in fact, I blame my wife. When it revealed, these ghosts are great at creating tension between couples or partners or spouses, because they will reveal themselves to one of them and not the other, and that's what they did. So when my wife started explaining what she saw and what she felt, I thought, I don't want to sound like I was overly chauvinistic or something, because I was not. I've always thought women are better than men, actually. But I felt she just had a baby. She's cooped up in a house for the first time. She's always been someone who's out and about. She's going through some mental changes. Unfortunately, I thought the same thing that other people started telling me later on. So I was a denier, and it didn't take long. So within 3 months, for sure, I was a believer, but I didn't have fear. I thought I could unfortunately, my behavior was wrong, and I thought I could basically outmuscle them. And you don't really want to do that. You know, for people who have activity. In fact, now I've got this book. Okay, it launched itself, so it actually was supposed to be in my daughter's name because I didn't want to be in the paranormal. I've got my scars and wounds from the 70s, and but all I do is give my daughter a flash drive, and then she does the publishing. Next thing I see is a book. I'm really not technologically up with it. I gave her a flash drive with a cover with her name on it, and as told to Catherine Higdon, and she got the book printed the way she did with my name on it, and it just took off. And I won't say how many copies because one author asked me, he's a friend too, he asked me how many copies I sold, and I told him, and he got mad at me. You're bragging, you know. Well, it sold tens of thousands, and it did it worldwide, and for whatever reason, it appealed to every man, not the specialists. You know, obviously, Bishop Long didn't read it, even though I sent him a copy, actually.
Did you really?
Yeah. I should have sent him, you know, one of my Elvis record collections, too. But
love it.
It appealed to every man. So the emails I get typically, even if I have to use Google Translate and they're from France or Brazil, are that someone read the book, they read this certain portion, and that's exactly what used to happen when I was a child, or that's exactly what's happening in the house I live in now. And it was to me it was such a remarkable thing because it was the book that a few traditional publishers looked at and said, no, it's not scary enough. Okay? And even my self-publisher, they looked at the cover and they said it's trash. They said, you need it professionally done, and they argued with my daughter. And instead now it sits atop of their 96,000 other books that they've sold since they've been in business. Right. And you know, so how do you like me now? You know,
right.
And you are so from Chicago.
You're like, oh yeah, I know. I can get in people's face. I don't stand for any BS. I mean, you know, that's for sure. So when people say, you know, when I get an email where someone says this figure came launching out of the wall with the wallpaper rubberized or something, I write it back and I say, yeah, that's frightening. I saw that movie too. You know, you know, there are certain things that are within paranormal boundaries, and I know quite a bit about demons, and I know quite a bit about ghosts. Now, there are other entities out there that I know nothing about, nor do I want to open the door and find out about. You know, we're talking voodoo and hoodoo and things like that. I don't want to know about that because every door you open, it arms you with a knowledge and an awareness that can be a burden. And
let's talk about that awareness for a minute. What I wanted to ask you now, like you were saying, you know, as far as the activity, you said you were like in denial, but you know, after reading the book, and I read both of them. It seemed like Marcia was experiencing things, but she didn't tell you because you didn't believe. When, you know, how did the shift come?
It was a slow process. It wasn't like one day I said I believe. It was like actually that what really happened was she basically slammed me because it started out getting between us. Initially it did it by taking the phone off the receiver. And I would call from work, and phones were very expensive, and each call was measured by a unit. So if you spoke a minute of local time, you paid for that minute. I thought she was on the phone all day. So I'd come home, and I didn't make very much money. And in those years, you know, a salaried employee, I had to work 6 days a week, 6.5 days a week, 10 hours a day, and made very little. And computer people were not regarded as anything more than we were a step below accounting in those years. Very few companies had a computer. I was lucky to have a job. So I'd come home and I'd be fuming. I tried to call you all day. What the hell? You know, the phone's been busy. Who are you talking to? I'm not talking to anybody. Well, she created a fortress in the kitchen. For some reason, that's where she felt safe. And she could see through the window. She could see the enclosed back porch and the sun. And there was a door to escape. She never, told me this until much later. The phone I strategically located in the middle of the apartment. And if you took the phone off the hook in those years, it wasn't automatic. Everything was switchboard controlled. So it wasn't like there were no area codes or anything like that. You got to call the operator. Well, if you took your phone off the receiver, apparently they would read that on the switchboard, and they would disconnect you. So it would give a little bit of it probably as long as the operator chose to let it do it, and then they'd pull the plug on it, and it would be dead silent. So even when you found the phone, you'd put it back on the receiver. You had to wait until they recognized it was back on the receiver and reconnected you. So it could be 5 minutes before you got a dial tone. So she'd be shocked. She'd say, no, I didn't know the phone was off the hook. And then I'd get upset. It would be like, well, why didn't you look? Why didn't you check? And we went through, round and round. I blamed my wife, then I blamed the dog, then I blamed the cat. And I had, you try to rationalize everything, and it's not like these things are, it's much like I told someone the other night, we're speaking about it, and we were sitting there talking, and she said, well, that could be very frightening. And I said, no. I said, right now, there was a door right close to us. I said, if that door swung open right now with nobody there, I said, would you jump out of your seat screaming? She said, no. And I said, exactly. I said, you'd be curious. It would puzzle you. It might baffle you, like, why did that door open? But initially, paranormal is not like Hollywood movies. There's no drums in the background, no screaming, no chorus singing, ooh, 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 and all that good stuff.
Right.
It's just a happening. And that's what I found it to be. And when my wife, at first I ignored it. And then when she complained about certain things, I decided I could defeat it. So I thought, well, if it is an energy or something or whatever it is, if the light in the kitchen flickers, I'll put a new one in. And, when she complained about the cabinet door, I said, I'll just nail that sucker shut, Now, there's a couple things wrong with that. And now when people write me about their problems, the first thing I ask them is, are you frightened by it? Because if they're not frightened, then leave it alone. Because I promise you that if you try to eliminate that activity, another activity will manifest. So when people write me and they say closet doors are a real common thing in this country, not in other countries. There are things that are common worldwide, like manifestations at the foot of the bed and knockings and footsteps. But closet doors are common, and if they don't frighten people, I tell them, they go to bed, the closet door is closed, they wake up, the closet door is open. Their clothes might be moved. I say, if it don't frighten you, don't mess with it, because I don't know, much like on Campbell Street, whatever I messed with only escalated their activity and changed it. You're playing with something that you cannot control. You can't see it. You have no idea how much energy it can accumulate, what it can do, what its intentions are, and you can't control it. Now, Anthony, as a man, we all believe that, within our domain, we are king. There's nothing that can be out of control within our domain. That's, I can't tell you how many people I talk to, and women write me, and they'll tell me, that this is what's happening. They'll describe something perfectly paranormal, replicated throughout the world. My husband won't believe me. Well, I know the husband probably does believe her, but he won't admit it. That there's something that he can't control. Because we all believe, that's who I was as a young man, that, okay, when I did acknowledge it, I'm going to kick it out of the damn house. I'm going to defeat it. If it were alive, I'd smack it in the face.
Right.
I thought, okay, but once again, if you're an investigator,
Yes.
are you an investigator? When you're facing something invisible, you kind of have a false bravado because it's invisible. It's like shadow boxing. I've known a lot of guys, especially in martial arts. You go through your kata, and it's enjoyable and it's discipline, and then you get into to combat, and you realize, oh man, that hurts. Okay, wow, these things can be like that. I mean, your greater percentage of ghosts are going to be benign, but the ones that aren't, you don't know what their intentions are, and they can come home with you. They can do all kinds of things. You have to be very careful. And I'm kind of against investigating, only because unless someone's going to pop up with something new, in 5 years I've heard more EVPs than I ever want to hear again. No one seems to be asking what I think are the right questions. At least I haven't heard the answers. I want to know, is that realm light or dark? Are you there alone? Are there others with you? Can you communicate with each other? Are you there of your own choosing? I want to know facts about that dimension. I don't care what their name is, because most times they're going to lie.
Right.
If they have a strong energy, they might be malevolent, and they definitely will lie. So you want to talk to Jimmy Jones, they'll say they're Jimmy Jones. It's much like a Ouija board. You talk to a Ouija board. I've never had anybody, not everybody can connect on a Ouija board, but if they do, I've never heard of anybody where they connect with a spirit, and the spirit says, I'm going to kill you. It scares the hell out of them. The spirit's going to answer your questions the way it thinks you want to hear them. It's going to try to make it addicting. It's going to try to move into your life. The same with EVPs. And, I won't talk about it on this program, but I could give you some great examples of investigators that really got ruined. Where their lives were ruined. Where they're I mean, I know one. It's he dropped out of college. He put on 150 pounds. He's depressed. He can't come out of it. And when I knew him 4 years ago, he was all optimistic, and I'm going to go out and get the best evidence, etc. I just stay away from it. So I'm a coward. I've had been there, did that, and unless something can be learned, I have kind of a theory about it too, Lucy. The majority of people I've met in 5 years and that I know of, and I know a lot of them because I don't know if you guys belong to paranormalsocieties.com.
No, we're not really into. We did have a group, or if you want to call it a group, way back when. But personalities clashed, and they weren't in it for the right reasons. We're in it to, we're not the Ghost Adventures of the television world. We're not the Eggers on. We're more into learning and understanding, and more so about even the history of things. Like I loved that you were trying to rationalize what was going on and trying to find the deeper meaning to what was going on, and going into your basement and discovering some facts and stories and history as to what you were dealing with. That fascinates me in this whole world, and trying to understand the history of things and understanding why they may still be around. That's sort of what Lucy and I sort of do. We're not, the gangbusters that go into, we certainly don't go into residential homes at all, because I can never live with myself if anything went wrong. But I was really interested in your story, and particularly how you were sort of, trying to discover what was causing it, and who was it, the real person. Who was that person?
I don't know, because you never get introduced to your to whoever it is that's there. And one of the first things I found that to me was meaningless when I was cleaning the apartment out, I think it is in the book, was a Ouija board, an old worn Ouija board. So whether I was dealing with ghosts that were relative to the building, or whether I was dealing with something things that were conjured, because we knew there were multiples. They had different personalities, and they were very territorial within the building. You don't know, and a lot of investigators, I tell them, to be very, very careful, because you do have a false bravado when something is invisible. I would guarantee that most of the investigators I know, Lucy, if I told them, hey, let's to hell with investigating this haunted house, let's go down to the Robert Taylor homes and investigate Building 3. All right, they ain't going with me. Okay, that's for sure.
Right.
And there's with good reason. Okay, I actually lived in Cabrini Green as a youth, so I know what those places are like, and they're dangerous. Okay, well, for some reason, people seem to take ghosts and these things lightly, and they can most of the time pull it off because, like I said, most spirits are not malevolent. But when they don't, there's not much that can protect you. I mean, a lot of people say, well, and I'm very spiritual. I believe in God. But I don't believe God's going to protect me if I do something stupid. Okay, so if I decide, hey, I'm going to go in the lion's cage and tug on its tail, God's going to look down on me and say, I don't care how many prayers these guys said, he's an idiot. I created some kind of moron. I kind of believe that. If you go into a place that is in fact, the person I mentioned, I actually went into an East Coast asylum, and it started out with them setting up their equipment and them hearing a voice in the background audibly saying, get out. That should have made them get out. Okay, they didn't, and I think he's paying a price for it. But as a young man, I was kind of that way. I kind of pictured what happened was in the basement. Marcia took one step in the basement, and she stepped right out. She said, I will not ever come down here. And I started telling her how I was going to make a laundry area, and she said, I'm never coming down here. So she actually forced me to put a dryer on our back enclosed porch and to buy at the time, Hoover had a washer that you could hook up to your kitchen sink. And I bought her that. She would not go in the basement. And in that basement was a shed where they had one shed that used to have coal, a coal chute, and two others for storage, and one of them was padlocked. Now, knowing that the building was ransacked, I thought, whoa, something good could be behind that door. I broke the shackles and the hasp, and me and my little brother, and the whole room was full of pornography, early pornography, so it wasn't anywhere near what we have today. But it was nudist magazines and different things, and the creep factor, the pornography didn't bother me. It was like, okay, this guy liked his nudies, But the back wall was covered with shoe boxes, and I didn't know what was in the shoe boxes. I thought maybe there's, for all I knew, there was a gold bullion bar in there. We started opening the shoe boxes, and there were little, about the size of baseball cards, there were cutouts from magazines, comic books, newspapers of women, and he would cut out their body parts and put them into stacks, and he had them rubber banded, and they went back 30, 40, maybe 50 years. And he put his name on each box, and he had his name on each magazine, and I called him Ben, and I thought this guy was sick, and my brother said, holy crap, this guy was really screwed up. And my guess is that was his private little shed, and so Ben became the focus of my anger. Whatever happened, I'd start screaming at Ben, like if he was there. I don't know if he was or he wasn't, but it gave me something to focus on. But when did I acknowledge the ghosts? I mean, my wife was already walking on eggshells and not sleeping, and when you have one of these things, you're going to suffer sleep deprivation because you're not going to sleep well. That goes without saying. Are we okay?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, I'm hearing little boops in the back. It's going to make you anxious. You're going to anticipate things. What it started to do to me was... Am I still on?
Yeah, you're still on.
Okay.
Difficulties on the back end.
We had an old clawfoot bathtub, and I would start my water. I'd set the temperature, run the water, and I'd go in the kitchen, and Marcia and I would have coffee and talk, and it was a good time of the day. I'd go in the bathroom to take my bath, and the tub would be empty, and the rubber plug would be wrapped around. It was on a chain. It'd be wrapped around the faucet. Well, of course, I'd be real upset, and Marcia knew exactly what was happening, and I denied it. I said, no, we're in Chicago. There's sewer gas that probably blew the plug out. And so it would do this every other day, and it became more and more frequent, till eventually I got tired of taking cold baths, tepid baths. I started sitting in the bathroom watching the tub fill up. And one evening at dinner, the lights started flickering on the new light fixture that I installed. And Marcia pointed it out, and I just said, BS, And she said, I can't take it. She said, you're sitting in the bathroom watching the bathtub plug, and yet you're denying that we have any activity in this house. And she started slamming me, and she was angry. And I realized she's right. Okay, maybe I can't explain it. Maybe I'm not scared of it. But I certainly know that things are happening that I can't control and I can't predict. And that's when I went to the parish priest. And that was a horrible experience. I mean, I set it up. We were having our daughter christened, and I set it up so that he would walk back to the building with us and have lunch with us and then bless the house. To me, growing up Catholic, that's going to solve everything, okay? Instead, what happened was the only reason I got the house was because I had run out of money. I didn't have the money for closing. But it was just a twist of fate that they needed somewhere to put Myra, the crazy old lady. They couldn't find a place to put her, so they said to me, will you keep her for 90 days? So I gave them the exact amount of money I needed to close, and I wanted it up front. So that's how I wound up getting the building. So Myra was still there, and when the priest came up the stairs to enter the building, she came out and she greeted him the same way she greeted me and the real estate man. She called him every foul name that there was. I had actually take her by the shoulder and push her back into her apartment and slam the door and threaten her. The priest then came upstairs, and he was shook, and I kind of assumed it was Myra, but in retrospect, I kind of believed that he'd been to that house before. I really do. But our whole family was there. Unlike Paranormal Witness, we had like 14 people there. And he decided immediately that he wasn't going to have lunch, that he was just going to bless the house and go. Well, being an altar boy, and I knew exactly what the ritual was. And he started in the front room, which was not unusual, and then he would proceed to every single room. He raised his hand with the holy water dispenser, and it just shattered. It didn't make a sound. It didn't no big explosion like in the movies or something like that. It just sort of crumpled in his hand, and his face went blank, and he got on his knees. He crossed himself and started picking up brass. And we were all looking at it like, what the hell just happened? And Marcia kind of knew, and I had an aunt that was very sensitive. She kind of knew. But everybody else was looking like, what the hell happened? And then he got up with the brass. He put it away. He took his stole, and he said, I must go. And I said, no. You got to bless my daughter's room. And I grabbed him physically by the shoulder and pointed him toward the room, and I said, bless this room. So he rattled it off in Latin, in hyperspeed, and then I mean, he was anxious to get the hell out of there, and we had a closet right next to the hallway door where we exited. They both looked identical. He actually walked into the closet, and the whole family had to bite their tongue because it was like, he just walked into the closet, and he almost closed the door behind him. And then he came out, and I, my friend who was blinded in Vietnam was holding the envelope. He was supposed to give for every service you give them a donation, and he blew the donation off and just ran out. And so I grabbed the envelope and I had to chase him actually, and I physically handed him the envelope as if I was handing him a baton in track. Okay, I'd run track and did hurdles. So he put his hand back. He put his hand backward, and I slapped the envelope into his hand, and he booked out. And it was like then things became actually more active. So whatever he did was almost like an assault, a violation, and things did become more active. All of a sudden, we started hearing audible voices, and our animals became tortured. I mean, all of a sudden, our cat, who had command of the front room, she had a velvet chair that she'd sit in. That was her throne. All of a sudden, one day, while we're eating, we hear her hiss and growl, and her tail is real big, and she comes out of the front room and heads for our bedroom, and she never went back in the front room again. And then our dog, they were only as far as scaring me to where I didn't never admit it to Marcia. Of course, I wasn't going to say I'm scared. But the one thing that really scared me, and that for you people who have animals are aware of these things. And, if you see your animal looking at something across the room and following something and there's nothing there, they can see these things. And they'll estimate whether it's a threat or not. If it's not a threat, they just accept it as being normal. Well, one night our dog, and this dog was very loyal. If a bear would have came at me, the dog would have got between me and the bear, no problem. It would have given its life instantly. It was part wolf and part shepherd. And one night it came into our bedroom, jumped up on our bed, and put its throat down, protecting its throat, and I mean just snarled. And the hair on its back stood up, and it kept staring at the doorway. And I didn't say anything to Marcia. I didn't want to frighten her, but it was like, what the hell is the dog seeing? What would scare this dog? I know a bear wouldn't scare the dog, but what would scare the dog? So then I started thinking, what is it that's here? Animals will be a telltale sign of paranormal, and I lost 2 dogs there, and our cat got thrown out the window, actually, twice.
Really?
And 40 years later, when a writer writes a book and you write something that's nonfiction, every now and then a writer will be upset because someone will show up and they'll say, that didn't happen that way. I had the opposite happen. My first floor tenant, who I could not find when I was writing it, popped out, wrote me, contacted me, and if you look on Amazon.com, the first review on the left-hand side, it's got the most posts and comments, is by Dan White. He contacted me, and so I said, hey, we're shooting Paranormal Witness. You want to be on? And he came down, and it was the first time we've talked in years. Well, he was our first tenant, and him and his wife, and they had experiences I would not share with them. I did acknowledge certain things because when they heard the audible arguing on the porch, they thought it was Marcia and I. And I never told them otherwise. So I didn't share anything. So 40-some years later, we're sitting on the set of Paranormal Witness, and they did move out because of the activity. And Marcia and I kind of believed that they had moved out and lived happily ever after. When he told me what actually happened within his apartment, I almost fell out of my chair. And he lost a dog too. I never knew it because the dog only lasted 3 days. He bought expensive Afghan, and it did exactly what I described. He let out in the morning to do its business in the backyard. It bounded down the sidewalk over the back fence, and it was gone. And it had been tormented. But we talked, and what I thought was him and his wife going into, another life and living happily ever after. The first thing he said to me was, that building ruined my life. And I said, what? And him and his wife, I guess, divorced. They separated and divorced right after they left there. His wife was affected by it. To what extent I can't talk about because I have no permission. He told me his story, which I could hardly believe, because I actually hid things from him because he was a Canadian Mohawk, native Mohawk, and I regarded him as being superstitious, and so did his wife, and so did my wife. So we didn't bring up anything. He would, and then we'd share if he brought it up. But if not, I kind of figured that he was superstitious. In reality, the Mohawk, the Native Americans and Native people of this continent have a deeper and smarter spiritual belief than we do. They're taught from the time they're children about the paranormal and about spirits, how to behave and how to deal with them. Can you hear that in the background?
No, I don't hear anything. What are you hearing?
I'm hearing like a machine running or something.
Yeah, it sounds like a printer.
Yeah.
I don't hear anything.
A paranormal printer in the background.
Well, Ed,
I just want to interject something, Ed. You do realize I am Cherokee Indian, so I understand exactly what you're saying about your tenant.
Yeah, it shocked me. I mean, once I knew an Indian chief, Chippewa, Ojibwe from St. Paul, Minnesota, who's actually an artist. He's a sculptor. And he taught me some of the language because in one of my novels I used the Chippewas. But I never talked to him on a spiritual level. And with Dan, we sat down and talked about his native education. And he was taught that, yeah, their spirits exist. And the only thing, that he was told to actually react to was if something happens that's considered negative. If it's positive, you ignore it. If there's nothing that's harmful to you, it's, a door could open or something could happen within their world, and that doesn't faze them in the least. It's they consider it part of life.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times on programs or that I'll hear people talk about Native Americans and, this building was built on a Native American cemetery or burial ground. They bury their people correctly according to their belief system, and the spirits don't hang around laying in those graves. All right. So to me, all of that is a bunch of malarkey. I'm not saying it's impossible because nothing in the paranormal is impossible, but it's not common. It's no different than in Chicago. How many cemeteries have they relocated in the Chicagoland area? They dig them up and move them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And in Missouri here, where we have acreage, my daughter owns a farm, 16 acres, and on it are 17 graves. There's a little cemetery. And 2 were former landowners that go back to Civil War, and the other 15 are assumed to be slaves that are buried there, but no one really knows. So, there's bodies and things everywhere. There's not necessarily spirits hanging around. And the what's and the whys, I can't tell you. I can give you some common. Right now I'm writing a book. It's going to be very, very long write for me. And it's cumbersome because nonfiction is hard work because you can't you have to report it, and you got to do your homework and your research and report it correctly. Unlike a novel where you can use your imagination and be a little bit creative. But in sorting out all my emails, and I've got 2 stacks. In 5 years, I've got 2.5 piles of copy paper. The 2 piles are 2 feet high.
Wow.
So it's thousands. Yeah, it's thousands. And so I'm sorting them. I got into my analytical mind and logical mind. I started sorting them by occurrences, and I started accumulating and seeing different things, like there's knockings are common everywhere. There's knockings. Footsteps in the hallway are common everywhere. Closet doors are most common in the United States, and I've got a reason for that, I believe. Bedside manifestations of different types are very common worldwide, and some are friendly, where you see your relative. Many are not. They're not friendly, or they're not negative. They're just there. Which is why I have webisodes, and I'm on YouTube. I have webisodes on my website, www.edwinbecker.com, and I talk about that in a webisode. That I feel that if you're in a place where you have a spirit, you should always protect yourself, and especially protect your bedroom, because that's where you're going to go to sleep. Your subconscious is vulnerable, and you're vulnerable. So make sure only anything good can enter that bedroom, and within your belief system, keep as many. My bedroom is a shrine. Okay, I've got 2 Pope blessed rosaries, and I've got a whole number of things in there, and it's been blessed a couple times. I sleep very well, and I don't worry about anything entering my bedroom. Maybe something, a relative could visit me and enter the room, of course, but anything malevolent is not going to get into that room or want or feel comfortable in that room. That's for damn sure. But you protect yourself, and I started sorting these things, and I realized, man, whether you're in the Philippines or whether you're in Scotland or Australia or the United States, there's knockings, and they love cabinet doors, and they love walking the halls, and there are certain things that they do in every country that are just common. And that's when I started to realize that, hey, women seem to be more sensitive and more talkative. I do have about 20% of them are men who write me. Sometimes the man writes me and asks me about his wife. He blames it on his wife. Okay, my wife says, I'm not going to admit it, which I get a kick out of that. And if I can't help them, I point them toward either the paranormalsociety.com, which has 3,000 investigators, and you can look them up by state. They're also worldwide. And or I point them toward Ron Fale in the Order of the Exorcists, where Ron is truly a priest. He's an ordained priest of the real. The other one is he belongs to the old Catholic religion, which kind of stymies me because the Roman Catholic religion goes back 2,000 years. What the hell could be older than that, give me that old-time religion is kind of why I looked at it. But I will point someone toward someone who can truly help them. And there are many investigators that will help people, and either much like our exorcism, eventually we'll get to that part where I explain it, but they taught me how to behave, and they tempered my behavior, and they sort of gave me an understanding of what that realm is about within their knowledge base of what they had in 1971. The true expert of that era was Hans Holzer. But nobody took him seriously, so when he was on Johnny Carson, he was always going to be the second or third guest, and it always, since Carson always left the guests on stage, on set with him, the other guests would be making fun of him behind his back, He believes in ghosts, woo-woo, and stuff like that.
Right.
there were no ghosts in that area. There was Casper, and there was the Canterville ghost, and there was the ghost in Mrs. Muir, which was a romantic type of ghost. But there was no horror.
Topper.
I'm sorry?
There was Topper also in the 40s.
Oh, Topper. I love Topper.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd still enjoy watching those movies. But that was our vision of a ghost. And so I had no fear. My wife did, because she had some experience in her teens with a psychic. And the psychic was spot on and had given her some predictions that became very true. So she was sensitive, and like women are. Women are more sensitive, and that'll always be a puzzle to me, why there aren't more women investigators than men. The other puzzle to me is that typically when I run into an investigator, the majority are over 40. I don't know. I only know one investigator in his 20s. I know a few that are in their late 30s. I don't know any in their early 30s. I know a lot of them in their 40s and 50s and 60s. And I have a kind of it's a deep theory on that, because I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm going to be 70, and at 40 is kind of a midpoint in your life where I know how men react. We sort of reflect on our lives and we decide whether we have a bucket list or not, and did we accomplish what we want? Are we satisfied? And then you kind of want to recapture your youth. Your gray hair starts popping out, and you that's when you go out and buy a convertible and start acting weird. Right. Women, women, they start getting magnifying glass mirrors and checking the lines in their face, and all of a sudden they're unhappy with their age, and so we go through our changes. But I kind of feel now I didn't have what I'm going to suggest. I didn't experience only because I had died. When in my teens, I actually got electrocuted, and somehow they revived me, and then I had a heart attack and died clinically, and they charged me back up, and so I truly know there's an afterlife. I don't talk about it often, but there is an afterlife. But I believe that people who have not had that experience, you get to 40 and it smacks you in the face that I'm middle-aged. And I truly believe that many of the investigators are trying to get a confirmation that there's more to life than where they're at now, that there is an afterlife. And there's some kind of comfort they get by being able to communicate. Not that they want to be there and be doomed to be on Earth, but to know that there is another dimension that they're going to evolve into. I truly believe that. It's kind of a deep philosophy, but there's so many people that I know that are of that age group that shouldn't be, because you would think the thrill seekers would be 24, 25, 26. They should be out there. Why would a 50... I'm sorry?
I think maybe it may be due to, and I use this excuse all the time, but I think it may be due to technology. I think, the 20s and early 30-year-olds that are out there are so distracted with technology that they're really not interested in, the grassroots of, what in essence, quote unquote, is the paranormal. I think the 40 and 50 and 60-year-olds are of the era where, we were distracted with technology. We didn't have any of those things, and so I think you're absolutely correct. I think it is that sort of midlife crisis thing, and trying to find out, is there anything else? I've got such a finite amount of time left. Is there anything else out there for me? And redefining sort of their spiritual beliefs and faiths and so on and so forth. But I don't know. I think the young generation out there is just too distracted to keep that attention going within the paranormal field.
Yeah, they're distracted, right? They're too damn busy taking pictures of themselves. I've never seen. If somebody would have told me that that telephones would morph into picture-taking cameras, no one cares. I mean, my daughter has my youngest daughter's 34, But she has one of these phones that does everything, all right? But the quality of the phone itself, and you're talking to her, is awful. It's like talking to a tin can. But, man, it can take pictures and selfies and stuff. And I don't, maybe I'm a dinosaur. I don't understand it. So, and this is the honest...
Sir, I don't understand it either.
now
I'm
this
not
is
saying anything.
this is the honest to God truth. Okay, I switched a couple months ago to consumer cellular, and they had a cheap plan. I can text if I want to. I don't text. I'll answer a text. I don't even see the purpose of texting. Actually, I don't understand it. Okay, it's teaching people not to spell. I mean, I'm seeing headlines on the news that are misspelled,
Yes.
But I don't use the phone. So about a month and a half after I got the phone, I got a phone call one evening, and they said, this consumer cellular. And I said, yeah, and I'm on auto pay, so it's like I know the bill's paid. They said, are you okay? And I said, I'm wondering, what the hell is this? I said, yeah, I'm okay. Are you okay? Typical Chicago response, and
right.
Why the hell are you asking me if I'm okay? And then they said, we monitor activity, and you just didn't have any. I told them I only use it for phone calls. I said, I carry it if I go out and about, and what else is it good for? I've got a wonderful camera. What do I need to take pictures, narrow pictures with a selfie? And some of these people that I have a lot of friends, so I have thousands, and I don't okay them when they apply to be my friend, and I look at their page, and it's pictures of some girl, and she's taking pictures of herself in a medicine cabinet. It's like you need help, okay?
Oh my God, I believe that.
Yeah, it's. I'm old. Maybe I'm looking at things too logically, but I think and truthfully, I haven't drank tap water since 1977, so I will not drink tap water. We're being polluted, and that's a fact, and
yeah.
For Hillary to approve of fracturing where we know they're injecting carcinogens is insane. And here in Missouri, we've got contamination everywhere. But I don't drink the water, but I think there's something in the water that's making... When I see people standing around the block in New York prepared to buy the iPhone 87 when they're holding the iPhone 86 in their hand, it's like they're crazy.
It's just bragging rights. That's all it is. It's they could say they got the newest one, and to me, who cares? It's a freaking phone. It's not gonna it's not gonna cook for me. It's not gonna drive me around the city. It's gonna make a phone call that my other one just did.
It's an unkind world. It's a world that I do have a book out there. It's not my bestseller. It's called A Trip Back in Time, where I'm kind of nostalgic. It's a wish. It's a story about time travel and a grandfather who can take his kids back to the time when he was 10 years old. And it's my nostalgic kind of glimpse at the past. And the people who read it love it. It's highly rated, but it's not it's not selling like True Haunting. But I miss the good old days, and I think our values are. I mean, Lucy, do you wear body armor in Chicago now?
We should, but we don't.
Natalie Martinez is still on the news there, right?
Yes, I think.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't watch local news. It's too depressing.
One of their reporters called me, and this goes back some time, and I'm due to come to Chicago because they're going to interview me and put me in one of their local programs, I guess, as a spot as a Chicago-born author. But the reason I had the opportunity and the offer, and it's an open offer. Whenever I get there, they'll shoot it and tape it. One of the reporters, I sent a copy of my book 5 years ago to NBC, since they had done the video, I figured they should read the book, and maybe they'd have something to say. Maybe they'd give me a free promo. I don't know if they ever did or not, because I really don't watch very much television. I don't have cable or satellite. I don't know the ghost programs from Borscht. But a few years after the book was out, I got a call from one of the reporters on NBC, and she said, they had passed the book around and everybody read it, and she said her best friend is in college, is buying a building on Campbell Street, and she said, "Can you tell me if it's your building or not?" Or because she won't put an offer on it unless she knows. So they gave me the address, and it was really at Campbell and North Avenue, which is about a half mile away or so. And I told her, I said, it's not the building in the book. So she said, we owe you one. And no one believes it. It's like I say in the book at that time, none of my friends, they all made fun of us, Marcia and I. They said we're crazy and we're imagining things. But they're not going to come to our house to sleep over either. People don't want to admit these things. And we became trapped. I mean, we were basically living from hand to mouth as far as financially. And with a new baby, of course, the baby got priority with everything, which is as it should be. Okay, so now we're losing pets. We got things. As a man, I had to fix the place up, so I spent time in the basement. And when you have these things, I was either brave or stupid, I guess. But I worked down there, and I had to clean the place out, and I had to bleach it and paint it and get rid of the smell of the coal oil. And there was a presence there that was always there. I mean, my flight or fight instinct was always kicked in to fight. And if you ask my wife, she'd say he was perpetually angry, which I was. I was ready to fight. And I'd be working, and I could feel somebody staring at me, and I'd turn around like if I was going to confront somebody, and there'd be nobody there, of course. Excuse me a second. I got to yell at my dog. Stop it. Shih Tzus have a way of, like, they have to dig a hole or something before they lay down, and she'll do it forever. But, it's one of the signs that I put in the back of the book. When there's so many signs of manifestations or presence, you got the traditional hair standing on end and goosebumps and cool air, a breeze, actually a hot flash, a ringing in your ears, feeling like you're being watched. There's a trillion signs of a presence, and we'd feel them all. And I would get like a hot flash. I would go from instantly feeling decent to instant anger. I'd be mad at something like I took a steroid or something. That's the effect it had on me. Was it embellished my anger, and I was always ready to fight, and I was mad at it, and I'd swear at it. And the kitchen door was that was a true thing. I mean, Marcia got upset because it would open the kitchen door while we were eating, and she maybe had the baby down for a nap. And I didn't think any big deal out of it. It was like, so what? Who cares? And she'd say, no, the door opens, and it's in control. And I said, no, it's not in control. And I tied a string around the door, and we had a little loop there where we attached the gate so our daughter couldn't crawl out when she was in the kitchen. I attached the string to the loop, and I closed the door, and then I stood there and I challenged it. And I said, Ben, open the door now, you know what? And minutes later, the door would try to open, and then it would sort of vibrate. And I'd start laughing, and I'd call him names. I'd tell him he's a lame ghost. I'd say, you can't even break a string. What kind of ghost are you? And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. All I was doing was antagonizing it. But eventually it got to me. It broke me down.
Ed, why don't you take us to the day of the actual televised exorcism? What was going on, and what were your thoughts, pretty much, of the whole, scene?
Well, it took a lot to get there because eventually I broke down. I couldn't take it anymore. I mean, what happens in these conditions? That's why when I read someone's book and they say they'd lived in a haunted house for 10 years and it was terrifying, horrifying, that's BS. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't handle that kind of environment for 10 years. And you won't find the words horrifying or terrifying in my book because if you're horrified or terrified, your fight or flight says flight, and you go and you don't come back. So when I read a story and someone says, this happened in my bedroom and I was terrified, and then I went home and went to sleep. No, you don't go back.
Right.
But it does wear you down. Eventually you don't sleep. You're walking on eggshells. You don't know what's going to happen next or where it's going to happen. You even start misinterpreting things, so you might blame stuff. If I misplaced my wallet and I did it, if I couldn't find it, I'd say, "What the hell did you do, Ben?" And I'd start screaming and blame the ghost. And you get confused, and it drove me into despair. And we were just, God smiled on us because there was a fellow who was involved in the Manson murders named Joe DeLuise, who was psychic, and somehow my wife connected with him. Now, she connected with two groups, which was highly unusual in 1971. The first group, they were not real. They maybe had good intentions, but they were more like curiosity seekers, and our building actually scared them. It scared them, and but when Joe DeLuise came, he sent in an investigator, which was author Tom Valentine. He's a pretty well-known author today, but he had quit his job with the LA Times to write a book on Joseph DeLuise because of the Manson thing. He was the investigator, and he collected, basically we filled out an application, and he asked questions that even rubbed me wrong. I thought they were getting way too damn personal. But they wanted to know that Joseph was not going to be in a situation where he was going to be pranked or made to look bad. So once they certified our house that, this place is haunted, then Joseph came in. And, Lucy, you'll appreciate this because when I met him, my wife is very accepting. She was very accepting. She takes everybody at their word, which is her weakness. I'm a Chicagoan. I don't believe anybody. All right. So when Joseph came in, he's a little Sicilian, and he had a goatee and black hair, and he was dressed in black, and his protege was a woman with black hair, and she was dressed in black. To me, they looked kind of sinister, actually. And he introduced himself, and then his first couple questions were really lame. I guided him up to the apartment. Our dining room was empty because we had no furniture. And he said to me, you don't use this room. And I'm thinking to myself, no lie, okay? I don't use the room. There's nothing here to use,
Right.
And knowing that there's two adults in the house, he looked into the bedroom. None of the bedrooms had actual doors. Ours had a vinyl door that we'd go back and forth. But he looked into our bedroom, and there's only two adults in the house, and that's the only furnished bedroom other than the one with a crib in it. And he says, "That's your bedroom." And I'm looking at him like, is this guy a moron? Or, I had no idea what a psychic was. And I don't play poker because I have an eyebrow that I can't control. All right, it'll go up. And once that eyebrow goes up, the next thing I'm going to say is not going to be good, okay?
Right.
So my eyebrow went up, and my wife right away grabs my hand, like, don't do it. And Joseph's protege, she grabbed my right hand. She held it warmly, and then she just looked me in the eyes, and she said, "Bullets." Excuse me. And only I knew what she meant. And she knew I knew. Because in that basement, I had found a small jelly jar with some empty casings and some real live bullets in it. And in those days, Chicago burned their garbage. In fact, right down the street over by Damon and Ashland, Damon Avenue and Armitage, I want to say, or Ashland and Armitage, I forgot. But I couldn't throw them away because I knew they'd be burned up and they could go off and hurt somebody. So I took the little jar and I put it in the rafters in the basement, and I sort of forgot about it, actually. She said, bullets, and immediately it sparked my memory, and I said to her instantly, I said, where? And she said, in the basement above the rafter. Well, there was no way in hell she could possibly know that. And Marcia had no idea what she was talking about. It was like, what the hell are you guys talking about? Because I had never told anyone. At that point, they had my attention. I dropped my guard. It was like, okay, this is really spooky. I had never been in the presence of a real, true psychic before. So they went through the house, and they took a couple hours, and they determined. Now, this is why you can't have a psychic and an exorcist, because I saw what would happen firsthand. A psychic is going to open their mind. And Joseph did an assessment, and he said, you've got 4 or 5 entities here at least. He said, one on the first floor in the front bedroom. He said, it's darker than I can deal with. He said, I'm going to have to call for somebody. I didn't know who he was going to call for. Okay, police, fire department, I don't know. What he did was he called for a priest. There was a father, James Wood, who had an NBC radio show on AM, who was a good friend of Joseph's. So he asked Father Wood, would you be involved and help me? Father Wood, being Catholic, said that he can't in any kind of timely fashion because he has to go through the protocol and bureaucracy. And the soonest, he said, we could possibly get permission would be beyond 3 months anyway. And so he recommended an Anglican, William Dale Davis, who was a true exorcist. I didn't know what an exorcist was. So, I had no idea. I just knew that they seem to know what they're doing, so have at it, If you can clean this place out, I'm happy. They planned an exorcism, and I guess I'm gathering this that Father Wood probably told the people at NBC. And the next thing I knew is we had a phone call from Carol Simpson, and she remembers it to this day because her and I communicated just a couple of years ago, and out of 100,000 things she's done, including anchoring the evening news, she said she'll never forget it. But she called and she said, would you allow us to film? And I said no. No way. It's the same thing I told Paranormal Witness, actually. I told them no, too. Except I got granddaughters that are, that can make it very painful for me if I don't do what they want. And they're sci-fi freaks. But I told Carol Simpson no, and then it was Tom Valentine, actually, his investigator, that said to me, do it for Joe. Well, they had never asked me for a thing, and Lucy, as a Chicagoan, I was waiting for the punchline. I was waiting for them to say, you owe us blank,
Mm-hmm.
But they never asked me for a dime or anything, and they had spent days there and evenings there. So when he said, do it for Joe, I said, okay. I kind of have to. I at least owe him that. And so Carol called back, and I said, yeah, we'll do it. And I was very paranoid that they were going to make us, I envisioned us being on the news and being the laughing stock of the city. So I wasn't sure whether I was going to, put a mask on or something when they interviewed me. Because here I am working in a business where it's all logic, and I'm, I don't want to look like a crazy person. But Carol Simpson is a very spiritual woman, and she was most serious. Now, some of the other people on NBC were not, but she was, and she was very kind. And they did the interview, and then they had so much footage. They had filmed actually for 2 days. They had 16 hours of footage on the building. which to this day frustrates me, because if you look at the YouTube video at about the minute and a half mark, you're going to see something white start to come out of the doorway and back off. And back off. Okay, well, that doorway is 10 feet from a wall, and it had no real door on it, so there was nothing hung on there. That was a ghost. Okay, there's no doubt about it. And knowing that they had 16 hours of film, they had shot at different times of the day to get whatever lighting they wanted, I wanted all the footage. But, of course, I couldn't get it. And I didn't want it then. I didn't give a crap then, actually. And I can't even watch that video all the way through, because it's like PTSD. I can smell that room. I can feel that room if I watch that video, and I don't like it. But in came NBC, and they interviewed, they did it in a couple parts. They interviewed us in the pre- and then post-interview. And in came the exorcists. And I did not know, that Joseph DeLuise was also an ordained minister, plus being a psychic. And they came in and they set up an altar. And you had all these NBC people there. Actually, a bunch of cars came. There was Carol Simpson, a sound man, and a cameraman. But, I'm going to have to clear my throat.
Sure.
Freaking allergies. These suits came, and they were all standing in a corner, and they were pointing and laughing like a carnival-type atmosphere, and I was PO'd. I mean, I was mad. It was like they're making fun of me, and I was very sensitive. And I had already had an argument with the priest who would not come back and bless the house, and he told me, we should get psychological help, and I lambasted him. I got kicked out of the parish, told not to enter their grounds. So here are these suits, and I'm really upset. I'm about to tell them to get the hell out. My eyebrow raised, and my wife's, Eddie, don't do it. Well, in come the exorcist, and William Darrell Davis set up an altar, and he looked at them, and he had a deeper voice than mine, and a James Earl Jones type with an English accent, and he said, "Everyone should know that once I begin this ceremony, no one will leave until it is concluded." With that, all the suits ran out. They all looked at each other and said, "Hell no," They went down. They ran out like little girls. And the one problem we had was the sound man wanted to leave, and I guess Carol, myself, and they all talked him into staying. He demanded that I give him a Bible, which I did give him, that he actually sat on. It's kind of desecrating, I guess, and he wanted a cross, which I gave him. And so the sound man stayed, and the cameraman, and, of course, Carol. And it went on for 3.5 hours. And I could tell, Joseph did go to another level. And I do believe that he cleansed the house of one spirit. I do believe that, because he sort of found out what the problem was, and we heard the exchange, and it upset the exorcist. He kept saying, "Come back, Joseph, come back," every time he thought Joe went to a vulnerable level. He was worried about Joseph being possessed. That's the thing about an exorcist and a psychic. Afterward, I understood, they didn't get along, and they never worked together again. Well, there's a reason. An exorcist keeps their mind like a brick wall. They're not going to entertain conversation. They're going to just spew sanctity at whatever they're confronting, and they're used to confronting something. A demon needs a vessel, which is why, all this talk of demonic housing and stuff is just a bunch of baloney. Unless Satan says to a demon, "Hey, I'm giving you a timeout, go hang out in that old house," because he was a bad demon or something. A demon wants a person. They want a body, and they're going to ride you to hell. You're either going to commit suicide or die a terrible death, one way or another. And when you watch the news, don't think it's a coincidence that so many of these things resemble each other. The husband is frustrated. He's had problems. He goes home, shoots his children, his wife, and kills himself. You know, how many times have you seen that? Way too many.
Yeah.
It's almost like a formula that's being executed. Well, it's not human nature. There is no parent. I mean, maybe there is. It would have to be so rare, but there's no parent that's going to harm their child or end their child's life. You know, there's something in control there. And we just had a situation here in Missouri the other night where, for no reason, there were two fellas, friends. The one friend pulled out a hunting knife and stabbed the other one. And then basically stood there with a blank look on his face and like snapped out of it and said, "What did I do?" And he called for the paramedics, the guy who did the stabbing, and basically said he had no memory of doing any of it. So, you know, what did that? He had no mental problems, no history of anything, no criminal record. Out of nowhere, much like that investigator from the haunted hotel, it was last year, that stayed overnight at that haunted hotel in the South, came out in the morning, took out a knife, and stabbed himself in the middle of the street. I don't think he intended to do that, you know. Something hit control, and an exorcist won't tolerate that. So, you know, when I knew that Chip Coffey was going to be on that program, I knew that the other fellow couldn't possibly be an exorcist because they would not work together. Chip Coffey's a medium. He opens his mind to these things and communicates. There's no way an exorcist would approve of that and be in the presence of that. No way that house could have had any type of negative energy that was strong at all. So it was all a Halloween put on, basically.
Yeah.
But we had the problem with Joseph DeLuise and the Exorcist. They didn't get along. The Exorcist didn't want Joseph to communicate, didn't open his mind. All in all, the thing was a failure. I mean, today I know you don't exorcise houses. You can cleanse houses. But an exorcist needs a entity to confront. And, you know, you can't just talk to the front door. That ain't going to work. And they'll identify that entity. In a true demonic situation is very, very, very rare. So when I meet an investigator or hear of one, and they say, "Oh yeah, we went in this place and we're trying to determine whether it's malevolent or demonic," if you even have to ask that question, it's not demonic. A demonic entity will hurt you and possibly kill you. Okay, I have a 1946 Roman Catholic exorcism manual, and in the first part of it, it describes the qualifications for the exorcist. Various qualifications. In those qualifications, toward the end, it says that they prefer the exorcist be of mature years, and they emphasize that. Now, there's a reason, okay? Not because the person's more experienced or wise or whatever. It's because they've lived a life. You know, and doing an exorcism can cost you your life. There is no doubt. But they are truly rare, okay? So when I meet someone who said, "Yeah, I did 3 exorcisms last week," it's like, you know, you also probably play Dungeons and Dragons and play other games too. Because you're dealing with something, you know, those people who read my book, Banished, unfortunately, I opened the door to demonology for myself that I didn't want to. It's something, it's a burden you live with. Once you're aware of it, you realize what it is. But demons are thousands of years old. They know more languages than even exist because they know dead languages. They're very, very cunning. They can read your mind. And they have power. I mean, they have various powers because in the hierarchy of hell, some of the stronger demons, they have legions and they have minions, and some of them are not as strong as the leader. But, yeah, unlike our Campbell Street house where the door vibrated and the mixer came off the wall, I can remember one day when I challenged Ben and the mixer came off the wall, and I said, "What a lame ghost." I said, you moved the mixer. I said, "I'm not impressed, Ben. I said, move the refrigerator, okay? Now, once I became educated, it was like, had that been a demon, he would have moved the refrigerator. They would have came flying at me. They don't have to store up their energy. They've got it from the punch. And so a lot of these people, I laugh when I hear these people that got certificates on the computer that says that they're exorcists and stuff, because the demon don't care about that piece of paper.
Right.
Wait a second, I'm going to do what you say because you got some kind of computer certificate. It's freaking hysterical, So there's a program I go on, it's in the UK, and they call me the paranormal guy because of some of my opinions, but I don't want people to get hurt.
Right.
And to me, I know what these things can do. They're not to be trifled with. I've seen a possessed man. I didn't stick around for the exorcism. And he was not physically like intimidating or anything like that. He was actually a medium-sized man tied to a chair. But the look in his eyes was like we were all raw meat. And if he could be untied, we were going to be screwed. And, I could read his eyes right away. And when Daryl Davis entered the room, he knew who the exorcist was immediately, even though he was in street clothes. You're dealing with an energy, like you see these YouTube videos and you see a crying woman and stuff like that. It's a bunch of crap. There's one out there that it was actually done by a friend of mine, and he used an actress as the woman he's exorcising, and it's not a lot of crying and gnashing of teeth. It can be, but it's going to be violent. And if I met one of these demonologists, exorcists, and they had maybe 6 stitches in their face, and they said they did an exorcism, now maybe I'll start to believe them.
Well, Ed.
Yes.
Ed, we're running out of time, but I do want to ask you, what happened to that house?
For 40 years, I had no idea. I didn't care. But it still exists. It still exists. It's been sold many, many times, from what I understand. It's been foreclosed on a couple times. And I have no idea. So I hope to God it's been cleansed. And but no, I'm never going to go back. I wouldn't go back for love or money. There's no way. And I've been offered to go back. It's like, no, not a chance. Because if they're still there, I don't want them to give them a second shot at me. There's no way. But again, it's like you're in Chicago. I don't care if you're in Brooklyn. I get a lot of letters from New York where people live in these old buildings and they have spirits in them. And it's just not an unusual thing. It's unusual. It may be that I did a lot of the antagonizing, because if you read my book, the first thing I did ignorantly was clean out everything in the second floor apartment and gave it to actually a secondhand store junk man. If they had any attachment to their belongings, I sort of slapped them in the face. Then I broke their Ouija board into pieces and threw that out. And I had no respect for anything as far as what was there. And it was the exorcist and the psychic that basically said, Ed, your behavior is terrible. You should have compassion. You should pray for these souls. You should not address them. You should not antagonize them. And they turned me around. I did a 180. Actually, my wife, I did everything my wife was telling me to do to begin with. She was right from the get-go. I just thought, I was a street kid. It grew up that way. I was a professional musician. I dealt with club owners. And Lucy, you know how many clubs there are in Chicago, how many are syndicate owned? So, I worked in a number of syndicate clubs in the famous El Morocco. I did work Rush Street and Whiskey A Go-Go and the Happy Medium and negotiated, so I was a bold young man. And that's who I was at the time. I just didn't give a crap. Paranormal didn't exist. Now, once we were done, I was lucky enough to give the damn place away. And, some idiot wrote a blog questioning that. Because he said, how did I give it away for $10 and pay the mortgage off? He didn't understand what a quitclaim deed did. When I signed that quitclaim deed, I didn't get $10. I gave away $400 plus my equity, because everything goes with a quitclaim deed. So he inherited my mortgage, he inherited my escrow, he inherited any equity that we had, and I got $10, which he never gave me, actually. But that was, I was only because he was New Age, him and his wife, and they were into that seance stuff and Age of Aquarius. I just told him, go ahead and join the Age of Aquarius. I'm out of here. We're tap, tap, no take back. People criticize me. They criticize me for no disclosure. Well, there were no disclosure laws. And honest to God, had I took spray paint and painted haunted house on the front, the city probably would have given me a fine. And they might have evaluated me and locked me up. Because there were no haunted houses. And afterward, Marcia and I just ran for the hills. We refused all interviews. We didn't talk to anybody. Maybe we could have been the first Amityville movie. I don't know, but I don't care either. It was like, just leave us alone.
Well, you know what, Ed? This has been a very interesting and wonderful conversation. And you know what? I really do think you're a strong person. You've got a talent for writing, and your books True Haunting and True Haunting 2 are must-reads, okay? You've also written other amazing works like Famished, A Trip Back in Time, Deathwalker 1 and 2, Banished, and Death Witch. Is there a new book or project coming up for you, or where can our listeners go to learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, I'm always writing multiple works, so other people think I'm very prolific, because when I'll release something, it's like a shotgun. I'll release like 3 or 4 different books at the same time. But I tend to work on one and then work on another. The one I'm working on it'll be my last nonfiction paranormal book, and it's based on all the letters that I've gotten from all over the world. So there will be a chapter on knockings, and I'll take the most compelling stories and put it in that chapter. There's a chapter on touching, where people have been touched and embraced, and there'll be a chapter on bedside manifestations. And, some will be from Scotland, some will be from the Philippines, some will be from wherever. I'll identify the country, I won't identify the people, because 99.999% of people who experience these things do not want public exposure. So the producers of Paranormal Witness are always calling me and saying, help, get us some stories. I can't, because people don't want to be on camera. They just don't, much like I didn't when they approached me. My granddaughters talked me into it, but that was the first time I had ever talked on public, was on that program.
Well,
Prior
Ed,
to that,
you know what? We do want to truly thank you for coming on the show. We want to thank you for sharing your time with us. You've given us so much to think about, and we hope that our listeners take your story and they do share it with their friends and their family. And we'd love to have you come back on the show.
Oh, I'd come back anytime. I enjoyed it, Lucy. Sometime we can just chat about. You were going to call me, and you never did. Okay. and if I knew you were from Chicago, we could talk a whole bunch, because I floated all over that city between my dysfunctional youth and as a musician. I worked north side, south side. So I used to work at a place on 65th and Pulaski called the Interlude, and there was a Cherry Lounge over on 22nd Street, and I worked at a lot of places. Eventually I went on the road, which is how I met my wife, met Marcia. But I love Chicago, and there's nothing like it. In Missouri, all we got is fried stuff, fried chicken, fried steak, fried chicken. No good ethnic. What they think is Chinese food, a million Chinese restaurants, and none of them are Chinese. So,
are you craving a deep dish now?
Am I craving what?
A deep dish, Chicago deep dish?
No, because that's a modern thing. In my day, all you had was thin crust. And you didn't put all this crap on the pizza. You either had, you had pepperoni. It was cheese, pepperoni, or sausage, or anchovies. I lived in an Italian neighborhood, so anchovies were popular. But no, there was no deep dish or double, cheese in the crust and double stack and all this crap. I just like give me a good thin crust pizza, and I'm in heaven. But where else can you get great? You can't get a corned beef sandwich like you can in Chicago. You can't get Polish food or German food or any kind of food like you can in Chicago. It's an ethnic delight.
You can't get Italian beef like here.
Oh God, the best Italian beefs. and there's 20 hot dog places.
Mhm.
I mean, my favorite was Jimmy's on Grand and Pulaski. They gave you the hot dog, and they gave it to you in a bag with real fries, and it wasn't real until you could see the grease coming through the bag, okay?
Mhm.
Then you knew it was going to be good.
Well, Ed,
we'll connect and we'll share stories.
Anthony, thank you so much for having me. Lucy, it was a delight. Sometime you just give me a call and we could chat. I'm storing up my ammunition for a Chicago visit, so we could talk about it.
Okay.
Awesome, Ed. Thank you.
To your listeners, God bless you all. Stay safe, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed.
I'll be on again, I hope, and I enjoyed being here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
And we'll actually post Ed's website on our Facebook page so that you can get all the information about him, his work, his books, and possibly even if you wanted to write to him, you can actually physically write to him, which probably nobody does anymore, or you can actually email him. And as you see, he actually reads. I'm assuming he reads almost all of his letters that he receives. Great guy, amazing story. I've heard the story of him and his story for a very long time. I don't know how old I was when I actually first saw the NBC televised exorcism. And now to imagine me talking to the actual person, I'm just amazed. And, I wanted to hear him speak. I wanted to hear him talk. So thank you, Ed. It was eye-opening. And, one of the things, before I'm going to hand it over to you, Lucy, but one of the things that is really interesting with Ed, and he briefly mentioned it while we were talking to him, but on YouTube, if you go to Higdon Productions, Higdon Productions, there's a website there. I believe that's his daughter's company, or his daughter puts this on. And it's little videos that Ed has put together and talking about different aspects and different areas and different genres of the paranormal, one in which was about protecting yourself. And if you go to that video under Higdon Productions, I think it's called True Hauntings, and then it says Protecting Yourself. Watch that video because he gives an amazing metaphor, simile, whatever you want to call it, in when he experienced walking his dog in the grass outside of his home and how that compares to how you should protect yourself. It's actually an eye-opening video, and I recommend that people watch that one in particular. Watch all the other ones, but that one in particular actually made me think, you know what? That's the point that people should be making, and that's what should be going out to people online and in books. That's what should be discussed and talked about. He's just an amazing guy. His story, him and Marsha, I don't know if I could ever have done what they did.
Well, you know what? The thing to me, I know the area where the house is. I know exactly where the house is. I'm not sure exactly which house it is, but I know that street. I know that neighborhood. And when you think about all the old buildings that we have here, here's a person who lives through this. You know, you see all these stories, you read things that are online, you watch Paranormal Witness, and you're seeing a dramatization, okay? I wanted to talk to him because he actually lived through it. And then, you know, like he mentioned, we had this, and I'm doing air quotes, exorcism that was televised this year.
Yeah.
Here you have 1970. No one talked about this stuff. No one mentioned it. Everybody knew that, you know, things happened. People had ghosts in their homes, but no one ever really came out and talked about it. Here you have somebody who allowed NBC to come into their home and film this exorcism. Now, like he said, it didn't work, of course, but that just goes back to the time. I mean, we didn't know that much about the paranormal back then. We still don't know that much about the paranormal. The paranormal is something that we're still learning about every single day. And you've got people that claim they know everything, or they know, you know, but this is a subject that is so wide open. And here's a man whose whole family, and the story, he only touched on a little bit of it. This occurrence affected more than just him and his wife. It affected some of his family members. It affected his tenants. It affected a lot of people, and very deeply. I really did want to talk to him. I mean, it's just amazing to me that he had gone through this. I'm intrigued by it, but I don't think I'd ever want to go through the same thing. And if you get a chance, you have to read the book, True Haunting, it's called. True Haunting 2 is the second book, and that goes from his wife's perspective. The first book is told from his perspective. The second book is from his wife's perspective and from the tenants. There is a lot of things that went on. So the main thing I want to get across to everybody is, like, when you hear stories, when you hear people say something about, you know, there's hauntings in their homes or they have a ghost, you can't discount it. You really do have to listen, at least listen, because I guarantee you they're most likely telling the truth. Now, unfortunately, nowadays, you've got people that they want attention. They're going to say anything to get some attention because there's been so much of this thrown at us in the media. But I not for 1 second did I ever believe that he was making anything up. I truly believe this is what he went through. And I was really surprised at the Catholic Church's reaction to what was going on. They pretty much turned their back on him. I mean,
you're surprised?
Well, you know what? I'm like him. Born and raised in Chicago, was a Catholic, practicing Catholic. You know, the church was your go-to. When you needed help, you went to the church. Here you have a man who came to the church, asked for help, and pretty much was told, we don't talk about that. We can't help you. There's nothing we can do. He hit a brick wall. And back then in the 70s, that was pretty disheartening. That was not something that you expected. You expected the church to help you. Well, nowadays we're a little bit more aware. You know, we understand, you know, that everything in the church isn't what it was presented. But back then, we had faith. We believed our priest was going to be able to help us in some way. And here you have a guy who went for help, and he didn't get anything. And that bothered me. That really bothered me.
Well, I just want to say there was a lot of technical difficulties tonight with the audio. And prior to starting the show tonight, we already got a warning message from Blog Talk stating that there was issues with the telephone lines and so on and so forth. And so you may have experienced some in and outs and some drops in our voices throughout the night. And so I just want to apologize for that. It is not our doing. It is not our equipment. It is the Blog Talk Central that is having issues with it. So I just want to give my apologies for that. But very quickly, Lucy, I want to share a strange anecdote with everyone. Last night, I was I was on YouTube and just perusing videos like I normally do, sometimes on paranormal, sometimes just for fun. And I don't know how, but I ended up watching our old video of you and I in Villisca, Iowa, at the Villisca Axe Murder House. And it was the video of you and I in the house, and where I was actually going around and showing where I had set up the cameras and so on and so forth, and where you had explained the whole scenario about why we call it the living room now. Do you remember that video?
Yeah.
I always used to not make fun of you, but I used to always comment, you always call it the front room. And I always know it as the living room. And as you heard tonight, Ed, kept calling it the front room. And what was strange and sort of, I guess you can call it a synchronicity, I was pulled to that video last night, and we were talking about front room and why they call it the living room now. And the reason is, and this story is in short, basically, is that people had funerals in their home and they kept it in the front area or front room of the home. That's where the wakes were being held, in your home. It wasn't at a funeral home. And so they had called it the dead room. And I think it was one of the women's magazines said it was just too morbid to continually talk and say the dead room. Why don't we call it the living room? More of a hopeful type of message. And that's how we got the word living room. But it was very strange that I got drawn to that video for two reasons. The date. Today is June 10th. Yesterday was June 9th. June 9th into June 10th is when the Villisca Axe murders happened. I realized that today on my way home, and I'm thinking about it, and it came to me again as I'm driving home. It came to me again, and I said, well, wait a minute, shit. It's June 10th. It's the anniversary of the Villisca Axe murders. How was I drawn to that? And here we are talking about front room with Ed, and he brought up the fact about the front room being utilized as wakes, and how pretty much almost every home, old house, is haunted or may have spirits residing in them because of it. If that's not synchronicity, I don't know what the hell is. I don't want to take up too much time.
Yeah, but you know what? You may leave the Villisca house, but I don't think the Villisca house ever leaves you.
No, it doesn't.
But anyway, let's go and let's do some business really quickly. We've got a couple minutes left. Let's go to the Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week. This week it is Chris Phoenix of Lexington, Kentucky. Chris is a new listener of the show, and he has made himself a presence in our chat room every week. He's a fan of ghost hunters, being human, and of course he likes Paranormal Review Radio. Congratulations, Chris.
Yeah, Chris, thanks so much for being a fan. And if you guys want to be a Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week, just like us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Okay. Well, very quickly, I want to talk about next week's show. And if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you may have watched a video called The Mandela Effect, Alternate Reality Evidence. It's a short video that Anthony made. So what is the Mandela Effect? Well, the Mandela Effect is described as what happens when someone has a clear memory of something that never happened in this reality. Have you ever remembered the details of something, an event, a title, even a line in a movie, and find that it's different in history? Books, newspaper articles, even the same movie where you remember lines from that movie are now suddenly different. There's a growing number of people who believe that parallel realities exist, and somehow we've been sliding between them without even realizing it. Does this sound too unbelievable to be true? Well, we have begun to notice some things that are different in our own memories and it's absolutely mind-blowing. Is this theory a reality? I just had a mic fart. Is this thing called the Mandela effect, is it real? And what are the implications on our world? Is this a discovery that can open the doors to knowledge, or is it something much more sinister? Join us next Friday night as we talk about the Mandela effect. We want to say thank you to the whole Paranormal Review Radio family who spends time with us every week, whether it's on Blog Talk, on YouTube, or iTunes. You are always there, and we love it. Thank you, Anthony, for being one of my spirit guides, really. So, until next week, Parapeeps, keep listening to each other and have a paranormal week. Good night.
Good night, everyone.